The wedding dress felt like a noose around Catherine Sterling's throat as she stood at the altar of Tucson's First Methodist Church, watching her groom of 3 years climb through the vestry window and disappear into the Arizona dust. It was May 1882, and the morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the faces of 200 wedding guests who sat in stunned silence. Catherine's fingers trembled as she clutched the bouquet of desert marigolds her mother had picked at dawn, their bright orange petals now seeming to mock the joy this day was supposed to bring. She could hear whispers starting to ripple through the pews, could feel the weight of pitying stares boring into her back through the layers of white silk and lace that had cost her father 6 months of wages from his work at the copper mine. "Catherine, honey." Her mother's voice came from somewhere behind her, thick with mortification and sorrow, but Catherine could not move. She stood frozen at that altar, staring at the empty space where Thomas Whitmore should have been standing, where he had promised to stand when he proposed to her beneath the cottonwood tree by the Santa Cruz River. Her mind struggled to comprehend what her eyes had just witnessed. Thomas, her Thomas, the man who had courted her with poetry and promises, had looked her directly in the face not 5 minutes ago, gone pale as a ghost, and fled like a spooked horse. The reverend cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should all take a moment." That was when Catherine's legs finally remembered how to work. She turned slowly to face the congregation. Every person she had ever known in Tucson sat in those pews, her father's mining friends with their sun-weathered faces, her mother's quilting circle, the shopkeepers from Main Street who had extended credit for the wedding feast, the neighbors who had helped raise the tent in her parents' yard. Thomas's family, his mother weeping into a handkerchief, his father's face purple with rage and shame. Catherine lifted her chin. She would not cry. She would not give them that. "There will be no wedding today," she announced, her voice carrying clear and strong through the church. "But there is food prepared and music arranged. You are all welcome to come to my parents' home and celebrate anyway. Celebrate that I discovered what sort of man Thomas Whitmore truly is before I bound my life to his, rather than after." She dropped the bouquet on the altar steps and walked down that aisle with her head held high, even as her heart shattered with every step. Her younger sister Clara rushed to gather her train, and her mother hurried after them both, but Catherine did not stop walking until she reached the church doors and pushed them open into the brutal brightness of the Arizona morning. Outside, standing beside a dusty black horse, was a man Catherine had never seen before. He was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He wore simple working clothes, dusty trail pants and a worn cotton shirt, with a gun belt slung low on his hips and a battered hat shading his eyes. He had clearly just ridden into town, his horse still breathing hard from travel. The stranger looked from Catherine in her wedding dress to the church behind her, and something like understanding crossed his weathered face. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat respectfully. Catherine barely nodded in acknowledgement as she gathered her skirts and started down the church steps. Behind her, she could hear the congregation beginning to file out, their voices rising in excited gossip. The humiliation was complete. By sundown, everyone in the Arizona Territory would know that Catherine Sterling had been abandoned at the altar. "Not all men are cowards, madam," the stranger said quietly as she passed him. Catherine stopped. She turned to look at him fully for the first time. He had a strong, honest face, weathered by sun and wind. His eyes were a startling green, the color of mesquite leaves after rain. There was something steady about him, something solid that made him seem like a man who would not run from anything. "I beg your pardon," she said. "You're intended," the stranger gestured toward the church. "I may be presuming, but it looked like something went wrong in there. I just wanted you to know that not all men are cowards. Some of us keep our word." And you felt compelled to share this observation with a complete stranger. Catherine heard the brittleness in her own voice, the anger that was beginning to seep through the cracks of her composure. "Yes, madam, I did." The stranger's expression did not change, because you looked like you needed to hear it. "What I need," Catherine said tightly, "is to go home and burn this dress." The stranger almost smiled at that. "That seems reasonable." Catherine's mother caught up to her then, breathless and tearful. "Catherine, please let us get you home. People are staring." "Let them stare," Catherine said, but she allowed her mother to guide her toward their wagon, which sat in the shade of a mesquite tree across from the church. As they drove through Tucson's dusty streets toward the modest adobe house where Catherine had grown up, she could not stop thinking about the stranger's words. Not all men are cowards. It was a simple statement, obvious even, but something about the way he had said it, with such quiet certainty, had lodged itself in her chest like a splinter. The house was in chaos when they arrived. The women from her mother's quilting circle had been setting up for the wedding feast, and now no one knew quite what to do. There were tables laden with food, a roasted pig, pies and cakes, barrels of beer that her father had bought from the German brewery at considerable expense. A musician sat in the corner with his fiddle looking lost. Catherine walked through it all like a ghost, acutely aware of her ridiculous dress, until she reached her small bedroom and could finally shut the door behind her. Her sister Clara helped her out of the gown, untying the dozens of tiny buttons that ran down her back, unhooking the bustle, removing the veil from her carefully arranged hair. "Thomas is a fool," Clara said fiercely. She was only 16, still young enough to see the world in absolutes. "An absolute fool." "Yes," Catherine agreed hollowly. "He is." "What happened? Did he say anything?" Catherine closed her eyes, remembering those final moments before Thomas had fled. He had been standing at the altar waiting for her, had smiled when she appeared at the back of the church on her father's arm. They had walked down the aisle together. The reverend had begun the ceremony. And then, when he reached the part about speaking now or forever holding your peace, Thomas had turned to look at her, really look at her, and something in his face had crumpled. "I cannot do this," he had whispered. "Catherine, I am sorry, I cannot." And then he had run, no explanation. No reason. Just terror in his eyes and then his back disappearing through that window. He said he could not do it, Catherine told her sister. "That is all." Clara made a disgusted sound. 3 years of courting, and that is all he could say, apparently. After Clara left, Catherine sat in her chemise and petticoats, staring at the wedding dress that lay crumpled on the floor like a dead thing. 3 years. 3 years of walks along the river, of Sunday dinners with Thomas's family, of planning a future together. Thomas had been so attentive, so loving. He had talked about the house they would build, the children they would have, the life they would make together. What had changed? What had she done wrong? The questions circled her mind like vultures, picking at her confidence, her sense of self. Was she not pretty enough? Not agreeable enough? Had Thomas met someone else? Or had he simply woken up this morning and realized that he did not love her enough to actually go through with marrying her? A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Catherine." Her father's gruff voice came through the wood. "May I come in?" "Yes, Papa." Daniel Sterling entered, his weathered miner's hands twisting his hat. He was not a man comfortable with emotions, but the pain in his eyes was clear. "How are you holding up, girl?" "I am humiliated beyond measure and my heart is broken," Catherine said flatly. "But I will survive." Her father nodded slowly. "I went to the Whitmore place, Tried to find the boy, talk some sense into him. He was already gone. His father said Thomas took a horse and rode out toward Tombstone. Said he left a note saying he was sorry but he could not go through with it. That is more explanation than he gave me. His father offered to pay back the money we spent on the wedding. How generous, Catherine said bitterly. Daniel sat down heavily on the edge of her bed. Catherine, I need you to listen to me. This is not your fault. You hear me? This is not about you being lacking in any way. This is about Thomas Whitmore being weak. Everyone will say I drove him away somehow. Let them say what they want. The people who matter know the truth. Her father reached over and took her hand in his calloused one. You are strong, Catherine. Stronger than I sometimes think you realize. You will get through this. Catherine wanted to believe him, but the shame felt like it would crush her. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Some guests did come to the house, perhaps out of genuine sympathy or perhaps just morbid curiosity. Catherine forced herself to dress in a simple blue calico dress and come out to face them. She accepted their awkward condolences with as much grace as she could muster. She even ate some food, though it tasted like dust in her mouth. It was late afternoon when someone mentioned seeing Thomas's family leaving town in a hurry, their wagon loaded with belongings. Guess they could not face the shame of it, one of the neighbors said, shaking his head. Catherine felt oddly hollow at this news. So Thomas had not only abandoned her, he had fled entirely. And his family, rather than staying to make amends, had chosen to leave as well. She understood it in a way. Tucson was a small town. The gossip would be relentless. But it still felt like salt in an already gaping wound. As the sun began to set and the remaining guests finally departed, Catherine helped her mother clean up. They worked in silence, packing away uneaten food, taking down decorations that were meant to celebrate a marriage that would never happen. Clara tried to help but kept bursting into angry rants about Thomas's cowardice until their mother sent her to bed. You should rest too, Margaret Sterling told Catherine gently. I am not tired. Catherine. Mama, please, I just need to keep moving right now. Her mother studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, but do not stay up too late. After her parents retired, Catherine found herself alone in the quiet house. She walked out to the small courtyard behind the kitchen, where her mother grew herbs and vegetables in the sandy soil. The night air was cool, a relief after the heat of the day. Stars scattered across the dark sky like spilled salt. Catherine sat on the low adobe wall that bordered the courtyard and finally, let herself cry. Great heaving sobs that shook her whole body, tears that felt like they would never stop. She cried for the future she had lost, for the humiliation she had endured, for the trust that had been shattered. She cried until she had no tears left, until she was empty and exhausted and numb. When she finally went to bed, she slept fitfully, plagued by dreams of standing alone at an altar that stretched on forever, while faceless crowds whispered and pointed. She woke the next morning to find that nothing had changed. Thomas was still gone. She was still unmarried and humiliated. The world continued turning as if her heart had not been torn to pieces. Catherine dressed carefully, choosing her most severe dress, a dark gray that made her look older than her 22 years. She pinned her honey-colored hair back tightly and studied her reflection in the small mirror above her washstand. Her brown eyes looked bruised, her face drawn. But she lifted her chin the way she had in the church, squared her shoulders, and prepared to face the day. She could hear her parents talking in low voices in the kitchen as she emerged from her room. She cannot just hide here forever, her father was saying. Give her time, Daniel. It has only been a day. Time will not change what happened. Better she faces it head-on and shows people she is not broken. Catherine entered the kitchen and her parents fell silent. "I am going into town," she announced. Her mother and father exchanged glances. "Are you sure that is wise?" her mother asked carefully. "Probably not," Catherine said. "But Papa is right. I cannot hide. I need to face whatever is coming." Her father nodded approvingly. "That is my girl. Want me to come with you?" "No, I need to do this alone." The walk into the center of Tucson took 20 minutes. With each step, Catherine felt her stomach twist tighter. She kept her head high and her expression neutral, even as she saw curtains twitching in windows, even as she felt eyes following her progress down the dusty street. She went first to the general store, where she needed to pick up the flour her mother had requested. The store owner, Mr. Peterson, looked acutely uncomfortable when she entered. "Miss Sterling," he said, his tone overly hearty. "How are you today?" "I am well, thank you. I need 10 pounds of flour, please." As Mr. Peterson measured out the flour, Catherine became aware of the other customers in the store, 2 women from her mother's church group, watching her with barely concealed fascination. "Such a shame. What happened?" one of them said, just loud enough for Catherine to hear. "I heard Thomas Whitmore left a note saying he could not go through with it," the other replied. "Can you imagine? At the altar itself. There must have been a reason. A man does not just run like that for no cause." Catherine's hands clenched into fists, but she kept her voice level. "The flour, Mr. Peterson. Right here, Miss Sterling." He wrapped it quickly, seeming eager to have her out of the store. Catherine paid, took her package, and walked out with her head still high, though she could feel her cheeks burning. The rest of her errands went similarly. Everywhere she went, people stared and whispered. Some were sympathetic, but others clearly thought she must have done something to drive Thomas away. By the time Catherine finished, she felt scraped raw, her composure hanging by a thread. She was walking back toward home when she saw the stranger from the day before. He was outside the livery stable, checking his horse's hooves. In the daylight, she could see him more clearly. He was probably in his late 20s, with the lean, hard build of a man who spent his life working. His face had the kind of weathered handsomeness that came from years in the sun and wind. He looked up as she approached, and recognition flickered across his features. "Madam," he said, straightening and touching his hat. Catherine found herself stopping, though she had not planned to. "You are still in town?" "Yes, madam, had some business to attend to." He paused. "I heard what happened yesterday. I am sorry." "Everyone has heard," Catherine said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Small towns are like that," the stranger said quietly. "News travels fast, and people forget that there is a real person at the center of their gossip." Something about his understanding tone made Catherine's careful composure crack slightly. "They think it was my fault. I can see it in their faces. They think I must have done something to make him run." "Then they are fools," the stranger said firmly. "A man who runs from his commitments like that, that is about him, not about the woman he is running from. You do not know that. You do not know anything about me or Thomas. I know that any man worth his salt would have talked to you if he was having doubts, not abandoned you in front of the whole town." The stranger's green eyes were intense. "I know that what he did was cruel and cowardly, and you deserved better." Catherine felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. "Why do you care? You do not even know me." "Maybe not," the stranger acknowledged, "but I know what it is like to be on the receiving end of people's judgment. And I figure sometimes a person needs to hear that they are not crazy, that they are not wrong to feel hurt and angry about how they have been treated." Before Catherine could respond, a voice called out behind her. "Catherine Sterling, is that you?" Catherine turned to see Mrs. Hendricks, one of the biggest gossips in Tucson, bearing down on her with an expression of gleeful concern. "My dear, how are you holding up? Such a terrible ordeal. I was just saying to my husband there must be more to the story. Young men do not just abandon their brides without reason. The implication was clear, and Catherine felt her temper flare. The reason, she said coldly, is that Thomas Whitmore is exactly what this gentleman said yesterday, a coward. Mrs. Hendricks's eyes widened, then narrowed as she looked at the stranger. And who might you be? Name is Harrison Noble, madam, the stranger said easily. I am just passing through. I see. Mrs. Hendricks looked between them suspiciously. Well, Catherine, I do hope you will not do anything to make matters worse for yourself. Your reputation is already rather precarious. My reputation, Catherine said, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger, was damaged by a man who promised to marry me and then ran away. I have done nothing wrong. Of course not, dear. I am just saying you should be careful about appearances. Standing here talking to a strange man, for instance. Harrison stepped forward slightly. Madam, I assure you there is nothing improper about our conversation. Miss Sterling and I were merely exchanging a few polite words. Mrs. Hendricks sniffed. Well, I should hope so. She turned back to Catherine. Do give my regards to your mother, dear. With that, she swept off down the street, no doubt already composing how she would relate this new tidbit of gossip. Catherine closed her eyes briefly. I should not have stopped to talk to you. I have just made everything worse. You have not made anything worse, Harrison said quietly. That woman was looking for something to gossip about regardless of what you did or did not do. You do not understand. In a town like this, appearances are everything. If people think I am being improper, it will only confirm their suspicions that Thomas left me for a good reason. Then those people are not worth your concern. Easy for you to say. You are just passing through. I have to live here. Harrison was quiet for a moment. You are right. I apologize. I am being presumptuous again. Catherine looked at him, this strange man who had appeared at the worst moment of her life and somehow kept saying exactly what she needed to hear. Who are you, really? What brings you to Tucson? Like I said, just passing through. I have been working cattle drives up from Mexico, but I am thinking about settling somewhere. Maybe buying some land, starting my own small ranch. And you stopped in Tucson because needed to rest my horse, resupply. Maybe see if there was any work around here. Harrison met her eyes. And yesterday, I saw a woman in a wedding dress walking out of a church alone, and I could not help but say something. Not all men are cowards, Catherine repeated softly. No, madam, they are not. They stood there for a moment, an oddly comfortable silence stretching between them until Catherine finally said, I should go. My mother will be wondering where I am. Of course, it was good to speak with you, Miss Sterling. Catherine, she found herself saying, you can call me Catherine. Harrison's weathered face broke into a smile, and it transformed him entirely. Catherine, then, and you can call me Harrison. Catherine nodded and turned to go, but then looked back over her shoulder. Will you still be in town tomorrow? I expect so. I was thinking about staying a few days, see if any of the ranches around here need an extra hand. Then perhaps I will see you again. I would like that. Catherine walked home with her heart feeling oddly lighter than it had since Thomas's betrayal. She had no idea why this stranger's words affected her so much, why his steady presence felt like an anchor in the storm of her humiliation. But for the first time since she watched her groom climb out that church window, she felt like maybe, eventually, she would be all right. Her mother was in the kitchen when Catherine arrived home, kneading bread dough with fierce determination. How was town? Margaret asked, not looking up from her work. As awful as you would expect, people staring, whispering, making assumptions. I am sorry, sweetheart. It will get better with time. Will it? Catherine set down the flour and leaned against the counter. Or will I be the woman who was left at the altar for the rest of my life? You will be whatever you make yourself, her mother said firmly, finally looking up. Yes, this is hard. Yes, people are talking. But you have a choice, Catherine. You can let this define you, or you can hold your head high and move forward with your life. I am trying, Mama. I truly am. I know you are. Margaret wiped her floury hands on her apron and came to embrace her daughter. You are stronger than you think. You always have been. That night at dinner, Catherine's father announced that he had spoken with Mr. Reynolds, who owned the largest ranch outside Tucson. He is looking for someone to help his wife with the household accounts and correspondence, Daniel said. I mentioned that you are good with figures and have fine handwriting. He said you could come by tomorrow if you are interested. Catherine's first instinct was to refuse. She had been helping with her father's accounts and her mother's household management for years, but the idea of working outside the home, of facing strangers every day, felt overwhelming. But then she thought about Harrison's words. Not all men are cowards. She was not a coward either. She would not hide. I will go, she said. Thank you, Papa. The next morning, Catherine dressed in her most respectable outfit and made the long walk to the Reynolds ranch. It sat about 3 miles outside Tucson, a sprawling property with a large main house, several outbuildings and corrals full of horses and cattle. Mrs. Reynolds turned out to be a pleasant woman in her 50s, overwhelmed by the task of managing the ranch's business affairs, while her husband oversaw the actual ranching operations. My eyes are not what they used to be, she explained, showing Catherine into a small office filled with ledgers and papers. And my handwriting has gotten atrocious. I need someone who can help me make sense of all this, keep track of expenses and income, write letters to buyers and suppliers. Catherine spent the morning reviewing the accounts, and by noon she had identified several errors and inefficiencies. You have been overcharged for feed delivery 3 times in the last 2 months, she told Mrs. Reynolds. And there is no system for tracking which cattle have been sold versus which are still on the property. Mrs. Reynolds looked impressed. Can you fix it? Yes, madam. It will take some time to set up a proper system, but I can do it. Then the job is yours if you want it. 4 days a week, $8 a week. $8 was more than Catherine had expected, more than most women could earn. She accepted immediately. As Mrs. Reynolds was walking her out, they passed through the yard where several ranch hands were working. Catherine's heart skipped when she recognized one of them. Harrison was by the corral, working with a nervous horse, his movements patient and gentle. He had not seen her yet, his full attention on the animal. That is Harrison Noble, Mrs. Reynolds said, following Catherine's gaze. My husband just hired him yesterday. He is very good with the horses, seems like a hard worker. Yes, Catherine said quietly, he seems like a good man. Harrison looked up then and saw her. Surprise crossed his face, followed by pleasure. He touched his hat in greeting, and Catherine felt herself smile in response. You know him? Mrs. Reynolds asked curiously. We have spoken a few times, Catherine said carefully. He was at the church the day of my wedding. Ah, Mrs. Reynolds's expression became sympathetic. I heard about that, my dear. I am very sorry, but perhaps this job will be a good fresh start for you. I hope so. Catherine left the ranch feeling more hopeful than she had in days. She had work which would give her both purpose and independence. And Harrison was there, which meant she would see him regularly. The thought made her feel guilty, as if she was being disloyal to Thomas somehow, before she reminded herself fiercely that Thomas had forfeited any claim to her loyalty when he abandoned her. Over the following weeks, Catherine fell into a new routine. 4 days a week, she walked to the Reynolds ranch and spent hours organizing accounts, writing correspondence, and bringing order to the chaotic business records. Mrs. Reynolds was kind and appreciative, and the work was satisfying in a way Catherine had not anticipated. And every day she saw Harrison. At first, they only exchanged greetings and brief pleasantries. Harrison was often working with the horses or riding out to check fences and water sources with the other ranch hands. But gradually, they began to talk more. Catherine would take her lunch break by the corral, and Harrison would join her when his work allowed. She learned that he was from Texas originally, that he had left home at 16 after his parents died of fever. He had worked cattle drives for years, moving from ranch to ranch, never staying anywhere long. Why not? Catherine asked one day as they sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree, eating the sandwiches Mrs. Reynolds had provided. Harrison was quiet for a moment, watching the horses move in the corral. "I guess I never found a place that felt like home, or a reason to stop moving. And now I am thinking maybe it is time to try. I'm not getting any younger, and there is only so long a man can live out of a bedroll. What would you do if you settled down? Buy some land if I can save enough. Start a small horse ranch. I am good with horses, always have been. Could make a decent living breeding and training them." Catherine could picture it easily. Harrison in his own place, working with horses, building something permanent. "That sounds like a good dream," she said. "What about you?" Harrison asked. "What do you want, Catherine?" It was a question no one had asked her in a long time. Thomas had talked about their future, but it had always been his plans, his dreams, that she was expected to fit into. "I do not know any more," she admitted. "I thought I wanted marriage, a family, a home of my own. But now that seems naive somehow." "It is not naive to want those things. Maybe not, but I trusted the wrong person and it cost me dearly." Harrison turned to look at her fully. "One man's failure does not mean all men will fail you." "I know that," Catherine said, though she was not sure she really believed it. "But it is hard to imagine trusting someone like that again." "I understand. Trust has to be earned." They sat in companionable silence for a while before Harrison spoke again. "For what it is worth, Catherine, I think Thomas Whitmore was the biggest fool in the Arizona Territory." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest. "Why do you say that?" "Because he had something precious and he threw it away. Any man with eyes can see what an exceptional woman you are. Smart, strong, beautiful, kind. If you were mine, I would never let you go." Catherine's breath caught. Harrison had said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, as if it was just an obvious truth. She found herself looking at him with new eyes, noticing the strength in his sun-bronzed hands, the steadiness in his green eyes, the gentle competence with which he handled the horses. "Harrison," she started, but did not know how to finish. "I know it is too soon," he said quietly. "I know you are still healing. But I wanted you to know how I see you, how anyone with sense would see you." Before Catherine could respond, one of the other ranch hands called out that they needed Harrison's help with a stubborn horse, and the moment passed. But Catherine thought about his words all the way home, and that night, and in the days that followed. She was not ready for anything romantic, she told herself firmly. It had only been a month since Thomas left her at the altar. Her heart was still too bruised, her trust too shattered. It would be foolish to even consider becoming involved with another man so soon. And yet, she found herself looking forward to seeing Harrison every day. Found herself seeking out his company during her breaks, listening for his voice among the ranch hands, watching him work with a fascination she could not quite name. Harrison, for his part, seemed content to simply be her friend. He never pushed, never made her uncomfortable. He was just there, steady and reliable, a quiet presence that made her feel safe. 6 weeks after the failed wedding, Catherine's sister Clara came to the ranch to walk home with her. As they made their way back toward Tucson, Clara chattered about the gossip she had heard in town. Mrs. Henderson said that Thomas has been spotted in Tombstone, working as a clerk in a hotel. Can you imagine? And Mary Johnson said she heard that Thomas told someone he left because he was afraid of being tied down. What kind of reason is that? It does not matter anymore, Catherine said, and realized she meant it. The sharp pain of Thomas's betrayal had dulled to a distant ache. She still felt humiliated when people stared or whispered, still struggled with feeling like she had somehow failed. But Thomas himself no longer occupied her thoughts the way he had. "Catherine," Clara said suddenly, her tone turning serious, "are you developing feelings for that cowboy, Harrison Noble?" Catherine felt her cheeks flush. "I do not know what you mean." "Oh, please." "I have seen the way you look at him when we pass by the ranch, and Mama said you talk about him at dinner sometimes. He is a friend, that is all. But do you want it to be more, did she?" Catherine was not sure. The idea of opening her heart to someone again was terrifying. But there was no denying that Harrison made her feel things she had not expected to feel again so soon, made her laugh, made her feel valued and seen, made her believe that perhaps not all men were like Thomas. "I do not know," Catherine said honestly. "It is too soon to think about such things." "But you are thinking about them," Clara observed shrewdly. "Perhaps, a little," Clara grinned. "Good, I like him much better than Thomas anyway. Harrison seems genuine. You have barely spoken to him." "I do not need to. I can tell by the way he looks at you. Like you are the most important person in the world." Catherine's heart fluttered at that, but she forced herself to stay cautious. "It does not matter how he looks at me. I am not ready for anything romantic." "Maybe not," Clara said, "but when you are ready, I think he will still be there." That night, Catherine lay awake thinking about Harrison, about his quiet strength and gentle manner, about the way he had believed in her when she barely believed in herself, about how safe she felt in his presence. It was too soon, she told herself again. Much too soon. But her heart, it seemed, had its own timeline. The next day at the ranch, Catherine was working in the office when she heard a commotion outside. She went to the window and saw several of the ranch hands gathered around Harrison, who was holding his arm at an odd angle. Catherine hurried outside. "What happened?" "Horse through him," one of the hands explained. "Landed hard on his arm." Harrison's face was pale with pain, but he tried to wave off the concern. "It is fine, just bruised." "It is not fine," Mrs. Reynolds said firmly, appearing from the house. "Catherine, help me get him inside. We need to check if it is broken." They got Harrison into the kitchen, and Mrs. Reynolds carefully examined his arm. It was not broken, thankfully, but badly sprained and already swelling. "You need to keep this wrapped and rested for at least a week," Mrs. Reynolds said. "No work." "Madam, I cannot afford to miss a week of work," Harrison protested. "You will still get paid, but if you do not rest that arm properly, you will do permanent damage." After Mrs. Reynolds left to fetch bandages, Catherine found herself alone with Harrison. She pulled up a chair beside him, her heart still racing from the scare. "You could have been killed," she said quietly. "It was just a fall. I have had worse. That does not make me worry less." Harrison looked at her and something shifted in his expression. "You were worried about me." "Of course I was. You are my friend." "Friend," Harrison repeated softly. "Is that all I am, Catherine?" The question hung in the air between them. Catherine knew she should say yes, should maintain the safe distance they had been keeping. But looking at Harrison, at this good man who had appeared in her life at exactly the right moment, she found she could not lie. "I do not know," she whispered. "I do not know what you are to me yet, but it is more than just a friend." Harrison reached out with his good hand and gently took hers. "I have been in love with you since the day I saw you walk out of that church," he said quietly. "I know it is too soon. I know you are not ready, but I need you to know. I will wait as long as you need, Catherine, but I am not going anywhere. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. How can you be in love with me? You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are brave and strong. I know you are kind even when people are cruel to you. I know you work hard and care deeply. I know that every moment I spend with you makes me want 1,000 more moments just like it. Harrison squeezed her hand gently. I know that I want to be the man who stands beside you, who never runs, who proves that not all men are cowards. Harrison, Catherine breathed. You do not have to say anything, he said quickly. I just needed you to know. Needed you to understand that what I feel for you is real, and it is not going anywhere, no matter how long you need to heal. Mrs. Reynolds returned then with bandages and liniment, and Catherine reluctantly pulled her hand away from Harrison's. But for the rest of the day, she could not stop thinking about his words, could not stop the way her heart raced every time she looked at him. That evening, as Catherine walked home, she finally admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny for weeks. She was falling in love with Harrison Noble. Maybe she had been falling for him since that first day outside the church, when he had said the exact words she needed to hear. Maybe it had been growing slowly all these weeks, through every conversation, every shared smile, every moment of understanding. It terrified her. The idea of trusting someone with her heart again, of risking that kind of pain and humiliation. But it also felt right in a way that things with Thomas never quite had. Thomas had been safe, predictable, familiar. He had fit into her life easily because he was from the same world, knew the same people, wanted the same conventional things. But Harrison was different. He challenged her, saw her not as an extension of her family or her social circle, but as her own person with her own worth. With Thomas, Catherine had always felt like she was trying to fit into a role, be the kind of woman he wanted. With Harrison, she felt like she could just be herself. Over the next week, as Harrison recovered from his injury, Catherine found herself spending more and more time with him. She would bring him lunch and sit with him while he rested his arm. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Harrison told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his parents, about the loneliness of always moving from place to place. Catherine told him about her life in Tucson, about the pressure she had always felt to be perfect, to meet everyone's expectations. About how Thomas's betrayal had shattered not just her heart, but her sense of who she was supposed to be. Maybe that is a good thing, Harrison said one afternoon as they sat on the porch of the ranch house. Maybe you needed to be free of those expectations so you could figure out what you actually want. And what if what I want is impossible? Nothing is impossible if you are willing to work for it. Catherine looked at him, at this man who had somehow become so essential to her in such a short time. What if what I want is you? Harrison's eyes widened. Catherine, I am not saying I am ready for anything serious yet, she said quickly. But I need you to know that I am falling in love with you too, and it scares me more than anything I have ever felt. Why does it scare you? Because I trusted Thomas and he destroyed me. Because everyone already talks about me, and being with you would give them more ammunition. Because it is too soon and I should still be heartbroken, but instead all I want is to be near you. Harrison set down his coffee cup and turned to face her fully. Catherine Sterling, I am going to make you a promise right now. I will never abandon you. I will never make you doubt your worth. I will stand beside you through whatever gossip or judgment comes our way, and I will wait as long as you need to be ready to trust me completely. How can you promise that? Because I am not Thomas Whitmore. I am a man who knows what I want, and what I want is to build a life with you. I will prove it to you every single day if that is what it takes. Catherine felt something break open in her chest, something that had been locked tight since the wedding day. She reached out and took Harrison's hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Then prove it," she whispered. "Show me that not all men are cowards." Harrison lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I will, starting right now." From that day forward, Catherine and Harrison were courting, though they kept it quiet at first. Catherine was acutely aware that people would judge her for moving on so quickly from Thomas, so they agreed to be discreet. But even keeping their relationship quiet, Catherine felt transformed. She smiled more, laughed more, felt lighter than she had in months. Working at the ranch became even more enjoyable because it meant spending time near Harrison. And when they had moments alone, they would talk and laugh and slowly, carefully, fall deeper in love. Harrison continued to prove himself in 100 small ways. When Catherine had a bad day dealing with gossip in town, he would listen patiently and remind her of her own strength. When Mrs. Reynolds needed extra help with a difficult project, Harrison would work extra hours without complaint. When Catherine worried about the future, Harrison would hold her hand and promise that whatever came, they would face it together. 2 months after they began courting, Harrison asked Catherine if she would like to go riding with him on her day off. They rode out into the desert hills beyond the ranch, the late summer sun warm on their faces, and found a spot beneath a cluster of saguaro cacti where they could see for miles. "I wanted to show you something," Harrison said, dismounting and helping Catherine down from her horse. He pulled a piece of paper from his saddlebag and unfolded it carefully. "This is a map of land for sale about 10 miles south of here. 50 acres with a creek running through it. It is good horse country." Catherine studied the map, then looked up at him with understanding. "You are thinking about buying it. I have been saving for years. I almost have enough." Harrison met her eyes. "But before I make any decisions, I need to know if this is what you want too." "What I want, a life out here. A horse ranch. It will be hard work, Catherine. Long hours, uncertain income at first. It is not the comfortable town life you are used to." Catherine looked out at the vast Arizona landscape, at the rugged beauty of the desert hills and endless sky. Then she looked back at Harrison, at this good, honest man who loved her. "The comfortable town life I was used to included pretending to be someone I was not," she said quietly. "Included trying to fit into a mold that never quite fit. What I want now is to build something real with someone who sees me for who I actually am. If that means hard work and uncertain income, so be it." Harrison's face lit up with joy. "You mean it." "I mean it. Though I should probably meet your horses first, make sure we are compatible," Catherine teased. Harrison laughed and pulled her into his arms. "I love you, Catherine Sterling." "I love you too, Harrison Noble." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was Catherine's first kiss with him, and it felt like coming home. When they returned to the ranch that evening, they found Mrs. Reynolds waiting with unexpected news. "Thomas Whitmore is back in town," she said quietly. "I thought you should know." Catherine felt her stomach drop. "Why is he back? I do not know, but apparently he is asking after you." Harrison's jaw tightened. "Do you want me to talk to him? Tell him to leave you alone?" Catherine considered it, but then shook her head. "No, I need to face him myself. I need to hear what he has to say. Then I am coming with you." "Harrison." "Not to fight or cause trouble," Harrison said firmly. "But you should not have to face him alone. I will stay back, let you talk. But I will be there if you need me." Catherine felt a rush of gratitude and love. "Thank you." The next day, Catherine walked into Tucson with Harrison at her side. They found Thomas at the hotel, looking thinner and older than he had 3 months ago. When he saw Catherine, relief and guilt warred on his face. "Catherine," he said, standing quickly, "thank you for seeing me." "What do you want, Thomas?" "To apologize, to explain, to beg your forgiveness." Catherine felt Harrison tense beside her, but to his credit, he remained silent. "Then explain," Catherine said coolly. Thomas glanced at Harrison, clearly wanting privacy, but Catherine did not ask Harrison to leave. After a moment, Thomas sighed and began to speak. "I panicked. Standing there at that altar, realizing what I was about to do, I just panicked. It was not about you, Catherine. You are wonderful, but I realized I did not want to be married, did not want that life. I wanted adventure, freedom, excitement. Marriage felt like a cage, so you ran, so I ran, and I have regretted it every day since." Thomas took a step toward her. "I was wrong, Catherine, so wrong. I have been miserable in Tombstone. Nothing feels right without you. I came back to ask if you would give me another chance." The words Catherine had longed to hear 3 months ago now felt hollow. "Another chance at what, Thomas?" "At abandoning me again when you get scared. No, I swear, I have grown up. I understand now what I threw away." "Do you?" Catherine shook her head. "Thomas, you did not just hurt me. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. You made me doubt myself, question my worth. And then you left town without a word of explanation. I know, I am sorry. Sorry is not enough." Catherine felt Harrison's steadying presence behind her and drew strength from it. "I have moved on, Thomas. I have built a new life for myself, and I am happy." Thomas finally seemed to notice Harrison properly. "With him? Yes, with Harrison. But it has only been 3 months. 3 months in which Harrison has been everything you were not. Honest, steady, brave." Catherine lifted her chin. "He has shown me what it means to be with a man who keeps his promises, who does not run when things get difficult, who sees me as a partner, not a burden." Thomas looked stricken. "Catherine, please. We had 3 years together. 3 years that ended when you climbed out that church window." "Goodbye, Thomas. I hope you find whatever it is you are looking for, but you will not find it with me." Catherine turned and walked out of the hotel, Harrison following close behind. Once they were outside, her legs suddenly felt weak, and Harrison caught her arm to steady her. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "I am better than all right," Catherine said, and realized it was true. "I finally have closure, and I know without any doubt that I made the right choice." Harrison smiled and kissed her forehead. "You are amazing, you know that. I am beginning to believe it." News of Thomas's return and rejection spread through Tucson quickly, and with it, Catherine found that people's attitudes toward her began to shift. The sympathetic looks became more genuine, the whispers less judgmental. She was no longer the woman who had been abandoned, but the woman who had found the strength to move on. A week later, Harrison made his offer on the land he had shown Catherine, and it was accepted. He gave his notice at the Reynolds Ranch, planning to start building on his own property by the end of September. "Come with me," he said to Catherine one evening. "See the land, help me plan where to build." They rode out together on a bright October morning, and Catherine fell in love with the property immediately. The creek that ran through it was lined with cottonwood trees. There were natural meadows perfect for horses. And the views were stunning, desert mountains in the distance and sky that seemed to go on forever. "We could build the house there," Harrison said, pointing to a slight rise that would give them a view of both the mountains and the creek. "And the barn and corrals there, close to the water." "It is perfect," Catherine breathed. "Does that mean you will marry me?" Catherine turned to stare at him. Harrison was down on one knee in the desert dirt, a simple silver ring in his hand. "I know it has not been long," he said. "And I know people will talk, but I do not care about any of that. I love you, Catherine. I want to build this ranch with you, build a life with you. I want to wake up every morning and know you are beside me. Will you marry me?" Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. "Yes, yes, Harrison, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, and Catherine had never felt so certain of anything in her life. This was right. This was real. This was the life she was meant to have. They were married in November, in a simple ceremony at her parents' home with just family and a few close friends present. Catherine wore a new dress, pale blue instead of white, and Harrison wore his best clothes, looking nervous and proud. When the Reverend asked if anyone objected, Catherine tensed for just a moment, but there was only warm silence. And when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison kissed her with all the love and promise in his heart, and Catherine knew that she had finally found what she had been looking for all along. Not a coward who would run at the first sign of difficulty, but a man who would stand beside her through everything. Not someone who wanted her to fit a mold, but someone who loved her exactly as she was. Not a comfortable, predictable life, but an adventure they would build together. They moved to Harrison's land the next week and began the hard work of building their ranch. They lived in a small cabin at first, barely more than 4 walls and a roof, while Harrison built a proper barn and corrals. Catherine helped with everything, learning to handle lumber and tools, discovering she was stronger than she had ever realized. By spring, they had their first horses, mares that Harrison had bought from another rancher, chosen for their good bloodlines and gentle temperament. By summer, Catherine was pregnant with their first child. "I hope it is a boy," Harrison said one evening as they sat on the porch of their still small house, watching the sunset paint the desert sky in shades of orange and gold. "Why a boy?" Catherine asked, amused. "Because I want a son to teach about horses and ranching, someone to carry on what we are building here. And if it is a girl, then I will teach her about horses and ranching just the same," Harrison said, grinning. "And I will have to beat away the cowboys who come sniffing around when she gets older." Catherine laughed and leaned against her husband's shoulder, feeling contentment settle deep in her bones. "I still cannot believe this is my life sometimes. A year ago, I was standing at an altar watching my groom run away. Now I am married to a wonderful man living on our own land, building something real. Do you ever regret it? That things happened the way they did?" Harrison asked quietly. Catherine thought about it honestly. "I regret the humiliation. I regret the pain. But I do not regret that Thomas left, because if he had not, I would have married him, and I never would have found you." "I would have found you eventually," Harrison said confidently. "Somehow, somewhere we were meant to find each other." "You really believe that?" "I know it. You are my home, Catherine Noble. You are the place I was searching for all those years I spent wandering. I would have kept searching until I found you." Their son was born in February of 1884, a healthy baby boy they named Daniel after Catherine's father. Harrison was beside himself with joy, holding his son with a gentleness that made Catherine's heart ache. "He is perfect," Harrison whispered, staring down at the infant in awe. "He has your eyes," Catherine said, exhausted but happy. "And your stubborn chin," Harrison teased. As Catherine recovered from childbirth and they adjusted to life with a baby, the ranch continued to grow. Word spread about Harrison's skill with horses, and people began coming from all over the territory to buy his animals or pay him to train theirs. Money was still tight, but they were making it work. When Daniel was 6 months old, Catherine's parents came to visit and were amazed at what Catherine and Harrison had built. "I am so proud of you," her father said gruffly. "You took a terrible situation and made something good out of it." "We make a good team," Catherine said, watching Harrison play with their son in the yard. "That you do," her mother agreed. "You know, I always liked Harrison better than Thomas, even from the start. Mama, you never said anything. It was not my place, but there is something about Harrison. Something solid and real. Thomas always seemed a bit flimsy, I suppose." Catherine thought about her former fiancé, wondering sometimes where he was, and if he had ever found whatever he was looking for. She hoped he was happy. But mostly, she simply did not think about him anymore. That part of her life felt like it belonged to a different person. Years passed. Good years full of hard work and laughter and love. They had 2 more children, a daughter they named Clara after Catherine's sister, and another boy they named James. The ranch prospered, and they were able to build a proper house, bigger and more comfortable, with room for their growing family. Catherine learned to ride as well as any cowboy, learned to rope and handle cattle, learned everything about horses that Harrison could teach her. She still did the accounts and correspondence, but she also worked side by side with her husband on the land, building their dream together. People in Tucson stopped talking about the wedding scandal eventually. Catherine became known instead as Mrs. Noble, the capable ranch wife who could break a horse as easily as she could write a business letter. The woman who had been humiliated at the altar became a distant memory, replaced by the reality of who Catherine had become. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Harrison took Catherine back to the spot where he had proposed, the desert land that had become their kingdom. "You remember standing here that first time?" he asked, holding her hand as they looked out over the ranch they had built. "When I showed you the map and asked if this was what you wanted." "I remember," Catherine said. "I remember thinking that I would follow you anywhere." "You have given me the best 10 years of my life," Harrison said quietly. "You and our children, this ranch, this life. It is more than I ever dreamed of." "We built it together," Catherine reminded him. "Your dreams and mine. When I saw you walk out of that church in your wedding dress, alone and hurting, I wanted to fix it for you," Harrison said. "I wanted to prove that not all men are cowards." "You did," Catherine said, turning to face him. "You proved it every single day for 10 years. You proved it by staying when things were hard, by working beside me to build this life, by being the man I could trust absolutely." Harrison pulled her close, and Catherine rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Catherine Noble," he whispered. "Today and every day for the rest of our lives." "I love you too," Catherine said. "Thank you for being brave enough to tell a stranger in a wedding dress that not all men are cowards. Thank you for being brave enough to believe me." They stood there together as the sun set over their land. 2 people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, who had built something beautiful out of pain and betrayal. And as they walked back toward the house where their children waited, Catherine thought about the girl she had been, standing at that altar while her world collapsed. That girl had believed her life was ending. She could never have imagined that it was actually beginning, that the best things were still ahead of her. That the man who abandoned her was doing her the greatest favor he could, setting her free to find the love she was meant to have. Harrison squeezed her hand as they reached the house, and Catherine smiled up at him, her heart full of gratitude for the unexpected paths that had led them to each other. Their daughter Clara came running out to meet them, her dark braids flying, Harrison's green eyes bright in her little face. "Papa, Mama, Danny and James are fighting again." Harrison scooped her up with a laugh. "Then I suppose we better go settle it." As they went inside to their noisy, chaotic, perfect family, Catherine sent up a silent prayer of thanks, for heartbreak that led to healing, for betrayal that led to trust, for a coward who ran, making room for a brave man to stand firm, and for the stranger outside a church who had seen a woman at her lowest moment and chosen to offer hope instead of pity. That stranger had become her husband, her partner, her home. He had proven that not all men are cowards. More importantly, he had helped Catherine prove to herself that she was stronger than she ever knew, brave enough to love again, bold enough to build a life on her own terms. The years continued to unfold in their steady rhythm. Daniel grew into a capable young man who shared his father's love of horses and gentle way with animals. Clara proved to have her mother's head for business and her father's fearlessness, a combination that made her formidable even as a child. James was the dreamer of the family, always asking questions and imagining possibilities. When Daniel was 18 and beginning to talk about buying his own land someday, Catherine and Harrison were sitting on their porch one evening, watching the stars emerge in the vast desert sky. "Can you believe we have a son old enough to start his own ranch?" Catherine marveled. "Time goes fast," Harrison agreed. "Seems like just yesterday he was the baby you were carrying when we were still living in that tiny cabin. That terrible cabin with gaps in the walls and a roof that leaked when it rained. But we were happy there." "We were," Catherine agreed. "We have been happy everywhere, though. I think that is the secret. It is not about where you are or what you have. It is about who you are with." Harrison reached over and took her hand, his touch as warm and steady as it had been the first time. "I would live in that leaky cabin again tomorrow if it meant being with you. Fortunately, we do not have to. We have a lovely house now with a roof that does not leak." They sat in comfortable silence for a while before Harrison spoke again. "Do you ever think about Thomas? Wonder what happened to him?" Catherine considered the question. "Not really. I heard a few years ago that he ended up in California working for the railroad. Someone said he got married. I hope he is happy, but that part of my life feels like a dream now, something that happened to someone else." "Any regrets?" "None," Catherine said firmly. "Everything happened exactly as it was meant to. If Thomas had not run, I would have married him and been miserable, probably without even realizing it. I would never have worked at the Reynolds Ranch, never have gotten to know you, never have built this life." "I have no regrets either," Harrison said. "Except maybe that I did not find you sooner. We found each other at exactly the right time." Another decade passed, and Catherine and Harrison watched their children grow up and begin their own lives. Daniel did buy his own land, just a few miles from their ranch, and married a sweet girl from Tucson. Clara shocked everyone by becoming a horse trader, traveling all over the territory buying and selling animals, as comfortable in a saloon negotiating deals as her mother had once been keeping ranch accounts. James went to university in California, determined to become a teacher. Through it all, Catherine and Harrison remained partners in every sense of the word. They worked together, raised their children together, built their legacy together. The ranch that had started with just a few horses grew into one of the most respected breeding operations in the Arizona territory. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. Friends and neighbors came from all over, filling the ranch house and yard with celebration. Catherine stood in the middle of it all, watching Harrison laugh with old friends, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Her sister Clara, now married with children of her own, came to stand beside her. "You look happy," she observed. "I am," Catherine said simply. "I am so very happy. I am glad. You deserve it after everything." "Everything happened for a reason," Catherine said, "even the hard parts." "Do you remember what I said to you all those years ago, when I asked if you were developing feelings for Harrison?" Catherine smiled. "You said he looked at me like I was the most important person in the world." "He still does," Clara said softly. "After 25 years, he still looks at you that way." Catherine watched her husband, now in his 50s but still strong and vital, still handsome in his weathered way. And as if he felt her gaze, Harrison looked up and met her eyes across the crowded room. The smile he gave her was full of love and promise, the same smile he had given her 1,000 times before. "And I still look at him the same way," Catherine said. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Catherine and Harrison walked out to look at the ranch by moonlight. The barn and corrals, the pastures full of horses, the small house where Daniel and his wife lived, the garden Catherine had planted years ago and expanded steadily over time. "We built something good here," Harrison said. "We did," Catherine agreed. "Better than good. We built something that will last. I am proud of us, of you especially." "Why especially me?" "Because you took the worst day of your life and refused to let it define you. You picked yourself up and built something better. You are the strongest person I know, Catherine Noble." Catherine leaned against him, his arm coming around her shoulders automatically. "I could not have done it without you. You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me that love could be something real and solid, not just pretty words and broken promises. I just loved you the way you deserve to be loved. That is more than you know. That is everything." They stood there together under the stars, and Catherine thought about the long road that had brought them to this moment, the pain and humiliation of being abandoned at the altar, the fear of trusting again, the slow building of love with a stranger who had somehow seen her worth when she could not see it herself. Harrison had kept his promise. He had proven, day after day and year after year, that not all men are cowards. He had stood beside her through everything, raising children and building a business and weathering the inevitable storms that came with life. He had never run, never wavered, never made her doubt his commitment. And Catherine had learned that she was stronger than she ever imagined. That heartbreak could be survived. That betrayal did not have to be the end of the story, but rather the beginning of a better chapter. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For seeing me, for loving me, for being exactly who you are." Harrison kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for taking a chance on a wandering cowboy who was fool enough to fall in love at first sight. Best decision I ever made." They went inside together, to the home they had built, in the life they had created. And as Catherine fell asleep that night in her husband's arms, she thought about how strange and wonderful life could be, how the worst moments could lead to the best things, how loss could make way for something better than you ever dreamed. She had been so sure, standing at that altar, that her life was ruined, that Thomas's abandonment meant she would never trust or love again. But she had been wrong. His cowardice had made room for Harrison's courage. His betrayal had taught her what real love looked like. And in the end, Catherine Sterling, who had become Catherine Noble, had found exactly what she was always meant to find. Not a man who talked about commitment, but a man who lived it. Not a safe, conventional life, but an adventure built on trust and partnership, and love that grew stronger with every passing year. The man she trusted had betrayed her at the altar. But a cowboy had said that not all men are cowards, and then he had spent the rest of his life proving it true. And that had made all the difference.